I thought I'd just talk about how the right actually wins and how they won this year. And it's been mainly through legislation. We often hear the aphorism from Andrew Breitbart, politics is downstream from culture. Well, cultural changes often come downstream of legal changes that go unnoticed because of a long march through the institutions. And there has since been a philosophy in the last couple of years from folks like Chris Rufo, who have said we need a reactionary vanguard to quietly go into institutions, use the institutions' waning liberal sentiments against them, and flip the long march on its head and get back to something healthier again. So it's not just all ideologically captured. And so I thought I'd go through a few bills. This probably won't be able to go on YouTube because some of those bills result in, kids being protected from the gender stuff. But oh well, again,
YouTube's not on our watch.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the good news I found. All right, that's fine. So the first one is that some of our guests, friends, and the like got a university freedom of speech bill pushed through. So this was the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act 2023, and it allows students, academics, and even visiting speakers to bring civil proceedings against universities, student unions, the like, if they are found to be guilty of acts of political bias, censorship, or unfair dismissal. So if you get your event cancelled, or if you're an academic thrown out of tenure like Kathleen Stock was because she was hounded by crazy students, then you can sue and be reinstated.
Hang on, is this why we're suddenly able to do university talks again?
Yes.
Because unironically, we're being invited back to universities all of a sudden.
I mean, that, and since going to Conservative Party conference and the like, people are like, oh, hey, it's you from Lotus Eaters. Do you want to come down and annoy all of the student unions? So it's also a personal thing. Though we did have our Bristol one. The event was, so by the time that this goes out, we've already done the event. They had to find a new location because the student union revoked the security license under the grounds of worries about Israel and Palestine. That was the reason given.
What?
Yeah. So we still got to do the event. Hope you all enjoyed it.
I'm pro ceasefire.
Are they afraid the IDF's going to raid the speech or something?
Yeah, apparently my Mossad connections are getting us in trouble.
I knew it, so you admit it.
I've just proven all the dissident right correct, I suppose. They also appointed a new director of freedom of speech and academic freedom to sit on the board of the Office for Students. Their efficacy has yet to be tested, but it's a bureaucrat.
Step in the right direction.
Better than it was before. Well done to the likes of Matt Goodwin, Doug Stokes, Eric Kaufman, all of whom we've done interviews with. They'll probably be linked in the description on this webpage. You can go and watch them. People are listening, at least. And we've got some credible people that believe the things we do, that know their stuff, and are pushing for changes in the law. That's very good. Speaking of changes in the law, we've had the gender-affirming care bans. Now, this has come from the backs of some of the stuff that we've done, hopefully, in the UK, like my conversation with Richie Herron. It's also been off the backs of people like Matt Walsh, and actually someone who I've spoken to. This is already out by the time that you guys get to watch this. Billboard Chris, absolute gentleman. I will admit I had a bit of a Jordan Peterson moment with some of these stories that he was going through, because some of the stuff in here is harrowing, so it did get to me a bit. But Chris is a absolute gentleman and the sort of dad that I would hope to be eventually. So great stuff. Go listen to him. He's been talking to plenty of Republicans. He's tried to make some waves in Canada, but it hasn't quite worked because they still voted for a conversion therapy bill ban. We'll get onto that in the UK in a bit. But in the States, we're seeing quite a few states that have turned around and said, actually, we're going to ban some of these procedures because they're not necessary. There's no evidentiary basis. And even if that were the only heuristic we're going off of, that's negotiable. But it's premised on a fundamentally false claim that you can change your sex. So why are we lying to and hurting children? Not good. So this is an article that's moaning about it, but I mean, we can just enjoy the fact that I think it's now 20 states that have passed bills and another 12 that have proposed them, but the Democrat legislature shot them down. But the ones that have passed the bills are Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and West Virginia. So to varying degrees of success, some have banned everything from puberty blockers to hormone treatments to surgery. Some have only done banned the surgery. Some have done the hormone treatments and the surgeries, but steps in the right direction. This year, legally speaking, because certain elections were won, because certain members of our wing of the dissident media and newly formed activist pressure groups have come out and said, here's what they're doing to kids. Why won't you listen? Kids have been protected.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's actually a positive. Small steps. It's also been happening across Europe. So that's positive. So this is now France, Finland, Norway, Sweden, even the Dutch who created the Dutch study are looking at this, and NHS England as well. Now, of course, with the permeable migration options within the EU and within the UK, you can go over relatively open borders and seek treatment elsewhere. It's frustrating. But again, small steps. So Finland, new treatment guidelines put out in 2020 advised against the use of puberty-blocking drugs and other medical interventions as a first line of care for teens with adolescent onset dysphoria. Sweden's National Board of Health and Welfare followed suit in 2022. They said such treatment should only be given under exceptional circumstances or in a research context. The reason they didn't do this before is because with any research project, this is what happened in Tavistock, you have to have a blind control group as well. So there was a coin toss as to if you were a kid, whether or not you'd be entered into the blind control group or just get the puberty blockers. So they said, well, we're going to forego the blind control group and just give everyone the puberty blockers and do a follow-up study. And that's now been declared, well, that's awful. So this does mean that some kids are probably still going to sign up to the clinical trial, but that means that less of them are going to be put on this and they're going to be spared this fate. So that's incrementally positive. The National Academy of Medicine in France recommended a plus grand reserve in the use of puberty blockers. And then a national investigatory board in Norway expressed concerns about the treatment. And the only gender clinic in the UK currently, until March 2024, when they go regional, that was formerly the GIDS clinic at Tavistock, they closed down and they have said, we are not going to provide puberty blockers to children as a treatment measure outside of the clinical research context. And this means that even though they're doing these satellite clinics now, the official NHS England guidance is to not do that. So those clinics will be operating under that auspice. We've just got to keep an eye on those clinics as they emerge if they don't stick to that. So again, baby steps.
Just the thing though, I always find the Americans really interesting, especially the American left really interesting. Because I think they think that Europe is actually a lot more liberal than it actually is when it comes to a lot of this stuff. For like abortion, for example.
Yes.
Like, oh, we can have abortion up until the point of birth. And the French are like, no, you can have it for 15 weeks.
Yes.
I mean, in America, the Democrats would scream and pull their hair out over that.
I think there's 9 states in the US that allow it up to full term, which is
monstrous. Evil. Yeah, it's genuinely monstrous.
Completely evil. But I think a lot of Americans take a look at the Nordic model or have heard of the Nordic model.
Have an impression in their mind of what they think the Nordic model is.
Yeah, and they make up these wild fantasies in their heads. Nordic model, that sounds like it means my kind of socialism.
It must be liberal utopia.
Well, in 2016 on the campaign trail, Bernie Sanders kept quoting the Nordic model, and I forget, it might have been the Prime Minister of Norway that
it was Denmark. He called them socialists, and the Prime Minister of Denmark was like, no, we're capitalists. What are you talking about? And they're just like, okay, Bernie, shut up.
Yeah, there goes your fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, on a lot of things like with kids and with abortion and stuff like that, Europe's actually quite a lot more conservative than America is. And sometimes even more conservative than the Republican states. So just be warned, it's not as simple as just, oh, Europe liberal, you know?
Yeah, and thankfully so. It seems things are trending in the right direction. Still uphill battle, but as long as more kids are getting saved, I'm happy. And speaking of which, we even had a small, I repeat, very small political win with the Conservative Party.
Tiny win.
Rishi Sunak has decided not to go forward with the gender and sexuality conversion therapy bill ban. Now, to
big issues here.
Is that who I think it is in the Pride flag mass?
It is Peter Tatchell.
Yeah.
Yes.
There we go.
Who's very upset about the fact that kids are being protected, I'm sure. So Rishi Sunak has listened to the Conservative Party that turned around and said, okay, what you need to do is disaggregate the fact that conversion therapy for gay people doesn't just mean electroshocks on the brain. It means the ability for therapists to have exploratory conversations at the request of the patient, even if they don't get horrified.
Voluntary conversations.
Yes.
This is not being imposed on anyone.
Yes. And even if they don't work, they should be allowed to do so. And then lumping trans in with that means affirmation only as the model, because you aren't allowed to turn around and say to a child, well, your gender dysphoria might be a product of the 5 to 6 other comorbidities that almost every patient comes along with that might be the source of this rather than you being born in the wrong body. You're not allowed to say that under the conversion therapy ban bill, which Labour has said they're going to do. Fortunately, it has been shelved. Now, at ARC, Danny Kruger did turn around and say, we expect one of our insidious colleagues to introduce this as a private member's bill somewhere down the road. Yeah. Probably someone aligned with Penny Mordaunt, let's be honest, because she's been pushing for this. I mean, Theresa May was the one that tabled it originally. But for the time being, it's been shelved.
Right.
Not bad.
Temporary stay of
execution.
Yeah, execution, yeah. But I mean, like, this is just such a small win, though. Like, I don't want to
You asked me to find positive stories.
I know, right? I know. But it's just so small. It's such a fringe. Like, okay, we're going to have a tiny win on irrelevant issue, basically. Is that?
The sad thing is, though, it's not irrelevant.
Well, no, it's not irrelevant. But you know what I mean? Like, there are much more pressing things for most people in the country. This only affects a very, very small slice of the population. But I mean, it is important.
I don't know. I like. Speaking of people coming up with deranged fantasies in their heads, I've got an amusing idea in my head now of a conversion therapy session where the person's like, I think I'm transgender. Oh, well, you might just be autistic. Have you considered 4chan instead?
I mean, we saw how that played out for Christian, so perhaps not the road we want to go down.
Connor.
Just saying. The last one that has been positive, it's been a development, and again, little bit of bittersweetness in the UK how this has been adopted, but we'll take the wins where we can get them. This is the age verification stuff that's been going around in the US.
Oh yeah.
And so they haven't gone down the EU and UK online safety bill control of the internet thing. I'm sure the Biden administration wants to do it in a very different way. But because the way that the states govern themselves, various states have turned around and said, hang on, why don't we have age verification for adult content websites? This seems like just a sensible measure.
Every child in the school's got a smartphone, but there's absolutely nothing stopping them from accessing Mia Khalifa.
Yeah, so they've turned around and said, okay, if you need ID to buy alcohol, tobacco, firearms,
or pornography in a shop,
yeah, then you should probably have the same thing online. And do you know how this came about?
Because no.
So one of the Republican state representatives of Louisiana watched the Howard Stern show.
Oh no. I just glanced at your notes.
So Billie Eilish said, I was exposed to porn at 11 and it destroyed my brain and it meant I couldn't have a real relationship. And she went,
I agree with it.
as a mum, that sounds really sad. So I'm going to do something about that. And so she put forward a bill that says porn websites are legally liable unless the websites, quote, perform reasonable age verification methods, which requires showing some form of state recognized ID to show that you're over 18. It passed the House 96-1. Who was the one? And the state Senate 34-0. And this sent the industry into total meltdown. I'm just going to enjoy the fact that they really didn't like this. So this is according to Ethical Capital Partners, which is the company that owns Pornhub. Let that settle in.
That's a
if
great
you've got
name.
to put the word ethical in your company name, makes me think that you're not as ethical as you claim to be.
I know it's overused as a trope, but it is quite Orwellian when they say Ministry of Truth and it's the body of censorship, ethical capital, literally human trafficking website. But there you go. They said that their traffic in the state has dropped 80%. Oh, actually, it does seem to work.
Yeah.
How strange.
Nobody's been applying for their porn licenses.
Weirdly, banning stuff actually gets rid of most of it.
Yeah. Also, 80%. So what proportion of your website traffic is children? Uncomfortable conversation, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, that might also just be people not willing to, show their ID so that they can watch porn.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, to be fair, there's no way I'd send any ID to a porn website.
Yeah.
Just no.
The other three states where the laws...
I'm comfortable giving you my IP when I log into your site.
The other states where the laws have been in effect, so that's Utah, Mississippi, and Virginia, for a few months, they just shut down their website entirely. So they thought it was actually too costly to process the user information and do data protection. So they just went, no, we're not running it here. And instead you get sort of an error message saying that your state legislature has blocked it. So 6 other states have passed copycat legislation. 16 others have introduced similar or identical bills. So by January the 1st, 2024, and this is when the Montana law is going into effect, 54 million Americans will live in states where they're required to upload their ID in order to access these kinds of websites. And the UK is now in the process of implementing a similar thing, thanks to Miriam Cates, who felt forced to do it with an amendment to the Online Harms Bill, which is frustrating, but it was going to pass anyway. But hey, good news. Kids won't be able to watch weird sex stuff on the internet and, go down the trans pipeline from that way. So
that's a win.
It's a win. It's a slow win.
So this is a dad. That's a win, man.
Yeah. So for everyone that's super discouraged about the state of the country, if we do put a bit of effort in, we can at least weaponize the law against our enemies and save some kids. That's not the worst outcome, I suppose.
Going to get some reeing over that last
Of
comment.
course I am, and I just don't care.
There are going to be libertarians on the internet.
No, I'm a scoon. That's going to get clipped out of context.
Congratulations.
Guys, have you considered going outside?
No, they have to encross their goon cave.
I want to
Harry.
congratulate you in advance on the meme compilations that are going to be made of that clip.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to check out the merch store and see mugs like this. Upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.